Why is it illegal in this state to touch a manatee, even by complete accident, yet somehow perfectly normal for an entire theme park to operate its own private government with zero county oversight? Welcome to 71 Dumbest Things from Florida, where we're digging up the wildest forgotten history, the most absurd old laws still technically on the books today, and the myths every single local still swears are true. From duels that were legal until 1968, to a city literally traded away by an empire. Stick around, because by the end, you decide what's real history and what's just Florida legend. Let's get into it. 1. Florida sits so far south that Havana is actually closer to Miami than the state's own capital. A tourist lands in Miami thinking Tallahassee is just a short drive north. They soon realize the trip takes longer than flying to another country entirely. Locals joke that lawmakers picked the capital's location without checking a map first. Truckers and students still misjudge that distance every single year without fail. Nobody expects a state shaped like a boot to stretch this far from its own leaders. Florida essentially runs itself from a city that feels closer to nowhere than everywhere. 2. In 1982, a group of Key West residents grew furious over a surprise Border Patrol checkpoint. It was choking off tourist traffic heading into their small island town. So local leaders decided to secede from the United States altogether. They gathered on the docks and dramatically declared war on the country. Then, someone broke a loaf of stale Cuban bread over a naval officer's head. 1 minute later, the whole town surrendered and demanded foreign aid instead. Reporters arrived expecting real chaos, but found islanders laughing and selling souvenir passports. The stunt worked so well that Key West still celebrates Conch Republic Day every year. Sometimes the fastest way to solve a traffic problem is simply declaring independence from your own country. 3. Florida was passed between Spain and Britain like a hot potato nobody truly wanted to keep. Spain first claimed it, then handed it to Britain after losing a war. Britain lost it right back to Spain after the American Revolution ended. Finally, the United States paid just $5 million for the whole territory in 1819. Andrew Jackson later became its first military governor almost immediately. Settlers arrived confused about which country's laws still applied to their land. Some townspeople reportedly kept switching flags depending on who showed up that week. Florida basically spent decades as the country nobody could agree on keeping. 4. Tallahassee only became Florida's capital because two rival cities refused to back down. Pensacola and St. Augustine both wanted the honor for themselves. Lawmakers grew tired of the endless arguing between both delegations. So they picked a spot roughly halfway between the two towns instead. At the time, that location was mostly untouched wilderness with almost no residents. Legislators had to travel by horseback through thick forest just to reach it. Locals joked that the capital was chosen simply to stop the fighting. Centuries later, Floridians still drive hours just to visit their own government buildings. 5. St. Augustine holds the title of the oldest continuously occupied city founded by Europeans in the country. Spanish explorer Pedro Menéndez de Avilés established it back in 1565. That means it existed decades before Jamestown and over a century before Plymouth Rock. Locals love reminding proud New England tourists of this exact fact. The city has survived pirate raids, fires, and multiple hurricanes across its long history. Old fortresses and narrow colonial streets still stand today as living proof. Visitors often expect Boston or Virginia to hold this record instead. Florida quietly beat everyone else to the punch by roughly 100 years. 6. Walt Disney World technically operates its own private government, separate from any Florida county. Back in 1967, state lawmakers granted Disney control over roads, utilities, and even building codes. This special district let Disney build rides and structures without normal county approval. Local officials in nearby areas have little say over what happens inside the parks. Some residents jokingly call it its own kingdom hidden inside Florida's borders. Legal experts still debate how much power any company should hold over land. Tourists riding roller coasters have no idea they are technically in a separate governing zone. Florida basically let a cartoon mouse run its own small country. 7. National news anchors spent years debating a self-defense law that started right here in Florida. Stand Your Ground passed in 2005 and quickly became a national legal firestorm. The law allowed people to use deadly force without any duty to retreat first. Supporters argued it protected honest citizens defending themselves in dangerous situations. Critics worried it gave people too much legal cover for reckless violence. Other states soon copied Florida's law word for word within a few years. Legal scholars still argue whether the law prevents crime or simply excuses it. Florida accidentally became the blueprint for self-defense laws across the entire country. 8. Florida's panther population once dropped to a shockingly low number of only 20 animals. Hunting habitat loss and speeding cars nearly wiped the species out completely. Wildlife officials scrambled to save the panthers before it was too late. Scientists eventually brought in mountain lions from Texas to boost genetic diversity. The plan sounded strange, but it actually worked better than anyone expected. Panther numbers slowly climbed back up over the following decades. Today, drivers still see warning signs begging them to watch for crossing panthers. Florida somehow saved its state animal through what basically amounted to blind luck. 9. A man left heartbroken at the altar built an entire castle completely by himself. Edward Leedskalnin spent decades carving and moving massive coral stones alone in Florida. Nobody ever saw him working, and no one knows exactly how he managed it. Some locals believed he secretly discovered ancient lost building techniques from another era. Others simply assumed he was stronger than anyone gave him credit for. Engineers today still study the structure, trying to explain his mysterious methods. His creation eventually became known as the Coral Castle and still draws curious visitors. Florida's monument to heartbreak remains one of the strangest unsolved mysteries in the country. 10. Florida's 1935 Labor Day hurricane remains one of the most intense storms ever recorded in American history. Winds reportedly tore railroad tracks apart like they were made of paper. A rescue train sent to evacuate war veterans arrived far too late to save them. Hundreds of workers building the overseas highway lost their lives that tragic day. Survivors described the storm surge as an unstoppable wall of moving ocean water. News of the disaster shocked the entire nation for weeks afterward. Engineers later redesigned coastal construction standards because of lessons learned that day. Florida paid a devastating price learning just how powerful nature could truly become. 11. Freezing temperatures nearly destroyed an entire industry that Florida had built its identity around. A series of brutal freezes swept through the state during the 1980s. Citrus groves that had thrived for generations turned brown and lifeless overnight. Farmers watched decades of work disappear within just a few cold nights. Many growers were forced to sell their land and abandon farming completely. Orange juice prices spiked nationwide because Florida supplied so much of the country's citrus. Some farmers moved their operations further south, chasing warmer ground. Florida's sunny reputation took a serious hit from weather nobody saw coming. 12. Miami barely existed as a real city until one railroad changed everything completely. Henry Flagler extended his railroad down the coast during the 1890s. His tracks connected a small settlement to the rest of the growing country. Hotels, resorts, and businesses quickly sprang up along the new rail line. Investors and tourists began arriving in numbers nobody had expected before. What was once swampy farmland transformed into a booming coastal city within years. Flagler essentially built Miami just to have somewhere for his trains to go. Florida's most famous city practically owes its existence to a stubborn railroad tycoon. 13. Women have been swimming gracefully underwater in mermaid tails since 1947 without any real break. Weeki Wachee Springs opened its famous mermaid show that same year. Performers learned to breathe through hidden underwater air hoses during each show. Audiences watched from a theater built directly into the side of a spring. The show survived changing owners' economic downturns and even declining tourist interest. Newer attractions eventually overshadowed it, but the mermaids kept performing anyway. Florida somehow kept this delightfully strange tradition alive for over 70 years. Tourists still drive out just to see grown women pretend to be mermaids underwater. 14. Some passengers can finish an entire flight faster than they can finish their in-flight snack. The world's shortest scheduled commercial flight operates entirely within the Florida Keys. It connects two small islands separated by just a few miles of ocean. The flight famously lasts under 10 minutes from takeoff to landing. Locals sometimes joke that driving would honestly take about the same amount of time. Tourists book the flight purely for bragging rights back home. Airlines have kept the route running mostly out of novelty and tradition. Florida somehow turned an impossibly short hop into a genuine tourist attraction. 15. Long before Cinderella's castle appeared anywhere in Florida, another theme park drew crowds of amazed visitors. Cypress Gardens opened decades before Disney World ever broke ground nearby. Visitors came to see elaborate gardens, water ski shows, and Southern Belle hostesses. It became one of Florida's first major tourist attractions statewide. Families traveled long distances just to see the famous water skiing performances. The park eventually struggled once bigger competitors arrived with flashier rides. Cypress Gardens closed, reopened, and changed hands multiple times over the years. Florida's original theme park quietly paved the way for everything that came after. 16. Elephants and acrobats once called a quiet Florida beach town their winter home every single year. Sarasota became known as the circus capital after the Ringling Brothers arrived. John Ringling chose the city as his circus empire's off-season headquarters. Performers, artists, and animal trainers filled the town during the cooler months. Local residents grew accustomed to seeing lions and trapeze artists wandering nearby. The Ringling family also built extravagant mansions and an art museum in town. Circus history became permanently woven into the city's cultural identity. Florida's sleepy coastal town somehow became forever linked with big top spectacle. 17. Some of America's very first military pilots learned to fly along Florida's Gulf Coast shoreline. Naval Air Station Pensacola trained the country's earliest aviators starting in the early 1900s. The base became known as the birthplace of naval aviation nationwide. Countless pilots who later became war heroes trained on that very same base. Pensacola's mild weather made it ideal for year-round flight training missions. The base expanded significantly during both world wars as demand grew rapidly. Today, the National Naval Aviation Museum sits proudly on the same grounds. Florida quietly helped launch American air power from a small coastal town. 18. Alligators, marshland, and endless sawgrass almost lost their federal protection before anyone stepped in to help. The Everglades officially became a national park back in 1947. Conservationists had fought for years to protect the shrinking wetland ecosystem. Development, drainage projects, and agriculture had already destroyed large portions of the swamp. Scientists warned that unique wildlife would vanish without some kind of protection. President Truman personally attended the park's dedication ceremony that same year. The Everglades remains one of the only subtropical wilderness areas in the entire country. Florida managed to save a small piece of untouched wild swampland just in time. 19. Frustrated hunters and fishermen invented a strange-looking boat just to outsmart Florida's endless mosquito-infested swamps. The airboat emerged from locals trying to navigate shallow, marshy waters. Traditional boats with propellers underneath kept getting stuck in the thick vegetation. Someone eventually mounted an aircraft propeller onto a flat-bottomed boat instead. The design let boats skim across watergrass and mud with ease. Airboats quickly became essential tools for hunting, fishing, and swamp travel. Tourists now pay good money just to ride these loud swamp machines. Florida's mosquito problem accidentally invented one of its most iconic tourist attractions. 20. Grabbing a drink before noon on a Sunday used to be completely illegal across the entire state. Florida once enforced strict blue laws restricting alcohol sales on Sundays. Bars and liquor stores had to stay closed during specific religious hours. Lawmakers originally passed these rules to encourage church attendance statewide. Business owners often complained about losing valuable weekend sales revenue. Some counties kept stricter versions of these laws longer than others did. Many blue laws eventually got repealed as attitudes toward alcohol relaxed. Florida's Sunday morning drought reminds everyone how recently these strange rules actually existed. 21. Some rural Florida counties quietly have more alligators than actual human residents living there. Wildlife officials estimate over 1 million alligators live across the state today. Swamps, lakes, and even golf course ponds provide perfect habitat for them. Residents in certain areas have simply learned to coexist with reptilian neighbors. Local news treats alligator sightings in yards as barely newsworthy anymore. Some homeowners have found alligators lounging near their swimming pools uninvited. Wildlife trappers stay busy year-round, relocating wandering gators from backyards. Florida's population count technically includes way more teeth than most people realize. 22. A bar in Florida has been pouring drinks since before Prohibition ever shut anything down. This particular establishment claims to be the state's oldest continuously operating bar. It somehow stayed open or quietly reopened through various legal crackdowns. Locals passed down stories about the bar surviving hurricanes, fires, and economic downturns. Regulars still gather there today just like generations before them once did. Historians point to it as a living piece of Florida's drinking history. Tourists visit specifically to soak in decades of barroom stories and legends. Florida's oldest bar has clearly outlasted more disasters than most buildings ever could. 23. A random Twitter account accidentally created one of the internet's most beloved recurring characters. It simply tracked strange police arrest reports happening across the state. Headlines featured people doing wildly bizarre things while somehow still getting arrested. The phrase "Florida man" quickly became an internet joke shared everywhere online. People started searching their own birthdays paired with the phrase for fun. News outlets nationwide began referencing the meme constantly in casual conversation. The account never expected to become a defining piece of internet culture. Florida somehow became an accidental celebrity through nothing but its own police blotter. 24. License plates once proudly advertised sunshine even while entire regions suffered through serious drought conditions. Florida branded itself as the Sunshine State on official vehicle plates. Tourism boards leaned heavily into the sunny image to attract visitors nationwide. Meanwhile, farmers elsewhere dealt with cracked soil and dying crops during dry spells. Nobody bothered updating the slogan, despite the obvious contradiction happening statewide. Locals joked that marketing teams clearly never checked the actual weather forecast. The nickname stuck around regardless of what was truly happening outside. Florida proved that a good slogan can survive even the driest reality. 25. Men in Florida could legally challenge each other to a duel all the way until 1968. A leftover dueling code technically remained on the state's law books for decades. Nobody seemed to notice or bother repealing the outdated rule for years. Lawmakers eventually stumbled across it while cleaning up old legal statutes. Most residents had no idea their state technically still allowed formal duels. News of the discovery spread as a strange bit of legal trivia. Legislators quietly removed the law once someone finally pointed it out. Florida accidentally kept a piece of the Wild West alive far longer than anyone realized. 26. More lightning strikes Florida than almost anywhere else in the entire United States combined. The state earned its nickname as the lightning capital through sheer statistics. Central Florida especially sees intense afternoon storms during hot summer months regularly. Golfers, boaters, and beachgoers get warned constantly about sudden, dangerous lightning strikes. Meteorologists say the state's heat and humidity practically manufacture storms daily. Several fatalities occur most years from people caught outside during storms. Locals learn from childhood to take shelter the moment thunder starts rumbling. Florida's skies apparently enjoy putting on a genuinely electric show almost daily. 27. Trucks racing through thick mud and swamp water have been an official sport since the 1940s. Swamp buggy races began as a practical test for hunting vehicles. Local hunters modified vehicles to handle Florida's swampy backcountry terrain reliably. Someone eventually turned informal competitions into an organized annual racing event. Spectators now gather regularly to watch buggies plow through deep muddy pits. The sport developed its own devoted fan base and specialized vehicle designs over decades. Naples still hosts races that draw crowds from across the entire region. Florida somehow transformed swamp survival gear into a legitimate spectator sport. 28. Unmarried couples technically broke the law simply by living together until as recently as 2016. Florida kept an old cohabitation ban on its books for over a century. The original law targeted unmarried couples sharing a home under one roof. Enforcement had mostly faded away long before lawmakers finally repealed it. Legislators eventually admitted the rule was outdated and rarely, if ever, enforced. Removing it required an actual vote inside the state legislature that year. Many residents were shocked to learn the law had existed at all. Florida quietly held on to this rule long after most people assumed it was gone. 29. Rockets started launching from Florida's coast years before NASA even officially existed as an agency. Cape Canaveral hosted its first rocket launch back in 1950. Early tests focused on missile technology rather than space exploration itself. NASA wasn't founded until 1958, nearly a decade after that first launch. The location's advantage came from clear ocean paths perfect for tracking rockets. Engineers and military officials gradually built up the site into a major hub. What started as missile testing eventually became the birthplace of American spaceflight. Florida's coastline was launching history before anyone even called it NASA. 30. A humble palm tree became the unlikely star of one of Florida's strangest official food dishes. Swamp cabbage comes from the heart of the sable palm tree. Early settlers learned to harvest and cook the tender inner core for food. The dish became a staple during difficult times when other food was scarce. Communities eventually held festivals specifically celebrating this unusual palm-based delicacy. Lawmakers later named it the state's official tree-based dish through legislation. Modern diners still find it surprising that people once regularly ate palm trees. Florida proudly turned survival food into an official piece of its culinary identity. 31. Key lime pie earned an official legal title that most desserts could only dream of achieving. Florida lawmakers named it the state's official pie back in 2006. The tangy green tinted treat actually comes from small, sour key limes. Bakers in the Florida Keys had been making it for generations already. Some mainland versions wrongly use regular limes and green food coloring instead. Purists in the Keys consider that version a total culinary betrayal. Restaurants across the state now compete over whose recipe is truly authentic. Florida proved that a good pie can absolutely earn its own government designation. 32. Deep in Florida's swamps, locals swear a hairy, elusive creature has been lurking for generations. The skunk ape is the state's own homegrown Bigfoot-style cryptid. Witnesses describe a foul-smelling ape-like beast, roaming the backwoods occasionally. A dedicated research center in the Everglades investigates reported sightings seriously. Tourists visit hoping to glimpse evidence of the legendary swamp-dwelling creature. Skeptics assume blurry photos simply show bears or overgrown men in costumes. Believers insist the smell alone proves something strange is truly out there. Florida somehow gave its swamps their very own beloved monster legend. 33. Swamp-dwelling monster sightings pour in from Florida more often than almost anywhere else nationwide. Researchers have documented more cryptid reports here than in most entire countries combined. Thick forests, endless swampland, and remote backroads provide perfect cover for mysterious sightings. Locals casually swap stories about strange creatures glimpsed near dark wooded areas. Some hunters claim to have heard eerie, unexplainable calls deep in the woods. Paranormal investigators frequently travel to Florida, specifically chasing these persistent legends. Skeptics blame bored teenagers' wildlife and overactive imaginations for most reports. Florida's swamps apparently have plenty of room for legends nobody can fully explain. 34. An entire fort built to guard shipping lanes never actually got finished as originally planned. Fort Jefferson sits isolated within the remote dry Tortugas off Florida's coast. Construction dragged on for decades due to funding issues and shifting military priorities. Advances in weapons technology eventually made the massive fort strategically obsolete anyway. Workers and prisoners still lived and labored within its unfinished brick walls regardless. The fort later served as a prison rather than the defensive stronghold intended. Today, visitors explore the abandoned structure reachable only by boat or seaplane. Florida's most isolated fort became famous mainly for never truly being completed. 35. One mail carrier spent years delivering letters by literally wading through swamp water up to his waist. This grueling route connected isolated Florida communities lacking any real roads nearby. Carriers braved alligators, snakes, and thick mud just to deliver everyday mail reliably. The job demanded serious physical endurance that most people could never handle. Residents depended entirely on these carriers for news supplies and communication. Some carriers reportedly carried mailbags above their heads through deep water crossings. Stories about this route eventually became local legend passed down through generations. Florida's mail service once required something closer to survival training than delivery work. 36. Boats striking slow-moving manatees eventually forced the federal government to step in and act. A noticeable spike in fatal boat strikes threatened Florida's beloved manatee population. Wildlife officials pushed for stronger protections to prevent the gentle creatures from disappearing. Speed zones were created specifically to slow boats down in manatee-heavy waters. Violators now face serious fines for ignoring these protective speed restrictions. Conservationists still monitor manatee populations closely across various Florida waterways today. Boaters are taught to watch carefully for manatees near warm water areas. Florida's gentle giants finally got legal protection after too many preventable deaths occurred. 37. No official peace treaty was ever signed, ending the fighting between Florida's Seminole tribe and the government. The Seminole Wars technically never received a clean, formal conclusion. Many Seminole families retreated deep into the Everglades rather than surrender completely. Their descendants often proudly note that their ancestors were simply never defeated. Government forces eventually gave up pursuing them through the difficult swampland terrain. The Seminole tribe remains one of the few nations never fully conquered militarily. Modern tribal leaders still reference this unresolved history with genuine pride today. Florida's Seminole tribe basically won by simply refusing to stop existing. 38. An explorer searching for eternal youth instead stumbled onto swampy Florida land nobody particularly wanted. Juan Ponce de Leon's 1513 expedition sparked the enduring Fountain of Youth legend. Spanish stories claimed a magical spring somewhere could restore youth and vitality. Historians largely believe the tale grew more popular after his death than during his life. Tourist attractions in St. Augustine still market themselves around this famous legend today. Visitors gladly pay to drink from springs promising restored youthful energy. Nobody has ever proven the legendary spring actually exists anywhere real. Florida turned one explorer's disappointing swamp discovery into centuries of tourist marketing gold. 39. A single fruit became so central to Florida's economy that lawmakers eventually gave it official status. The orange was named Florida's official state fruit due to its economic dominance. Citrus groves once covered massive stretches of central and southern Florida land. Orange juice production turned into one of the state's most identifiable industries nationwide. Freezes, diseases, and development have all threatened the industry at various points. Despite setbacks, oranges remain deeply tied to Florida's identity and marketing image. Tourists still buy bags of citrus straight from roadside stands statewide. Florida's most famous fruit earned its title through decades of genuine economic muscle. 40. An American astronaut left Earth's atmosphere for the very first time from Florida's own coastline. John Glenn launched into orbit from Cape Canaveral back in 1962. The entire nation watched anxiously as his capsule circled the planet successfully. Space Coast communities became forever linked with America's growing space program afterward. Engineers and scientists flocked to the area supporting future missions for decades. NASA's presence transformed sleepy coastal towns into bustling aerospace communities almost overnight. Locals still proudly claim their beaches as the true birthplace of American spaceflight. Florida launched a nation's ambitions right alongside its own historic rocket program. 41. Farm workers picking tomatoes under brutal conditions eventually sparked one of the era's most important labor movements. Florida's tomato industry became central to major farm worker rights efforts during the 1980s. Migrant laborers endured low wages and harsh working conditions across large agricultural operations. Organizers pushed hard for better pay and improved treatment on Florida farms. National attention eventually turned toward the struggles facing agricultural workers statewide. Coalitions formed specifically to pressure large buyers into demanding fairer labor practices. These efforts helped inspire similar labor movements across other states nationwide. Florida's tomato fields quietly became ground zero for a lasting fight over farm worker dignity. 42. The longest and most expensive Indian wars in American history were fought entirely within Florida's borders. The Seminole Wars stretched across decades of brutal conflict and resistance. Government forces struggled repeatedly against Seminole fighters hiding within dense swampland terrain. Massive amounts of money and manpower were poured into these prolonged military campaigns. Many soldiers found the humid, unfamiliar terrain nearly impossible to navigate effectively. Seminole resistance fighters used their knowledge of the landscape as a major advantage. Historians still cite these wars as remarkably costly compared to other conflicts. Florida's swamps proved far tougher to conquer than military planners ever expected. 43. A mineral most people barely think about once made Florida the world's leading global exporter. Phosphate mining became a massive industry across central Florida for decades. Companies extracted the mineral primarily for use in fertilizer production worldwide. Entire towns grew around mining operations, supporting thousands of local jobs. Environmental concerns eventually arose regarding water contamination and land disruption from mining. Regulations tightened over time, forcing companies to adopt safer extraction practices. Florida still remains a major phosphate producer despite ongoing environmental debates today. Florida's ground beneath its swamps turned out to be surprisingly valuable after all. 44. A sudden wave of immigration completely reshaped Miami's culture within just a few chaotic months. The 1980 Mariel boat lift brought roughly 125,000 Cuban immigrants to Florida. Fidel Castro unexpectedly allowed citizens to leave the island freely for a period. Boats packed with refugees arrived constantly along Florida's southern coastline that year. Miami's neighborhoods, businesses, and culture transformed rapidly as newcomers settled in. Some long-time residents struggled to adjust to such a massive sudden population shift. Cuban culture became deeply woven into Miami's identity following this historic event. Florida absorbed an entire wave of history within a matter of months. 45. Perfectly healthy backyard citrus trees were destroyed nationwide because of a stubborn plant disease outbreak. Citrus canker outbreaks forced Florida officials to remove millions of infected trees statewide. The disease spread easily and threatened the state's massive commercial citrus industry. Homeowners were often required to cut down healthy-looking trees regardless of protest. Many residents felt heartbroken watching decades-old trees get bulldozed from their yards. Officials argued the drastic measures protected the broader citrus economy from total collapse. Compensation programs existed, but rarely satisfied angry homeowners who lost cherished trees. Florida sacrificed countless backyard trees fighting a disease nobody could fully control. 46. A massive hidden water source secretly keeps much of Central Florida's taps running every single day. The Green Swamp quietly supplies drinking water to a huge surrounding region. Few residents realize how directly their tap water connects to this wetland area. Conservationists have fought hard to protect the swamp from development and pollution. Rivers, springs, and aquifers throughout the region all trace back to this source. Development pressures constantly threaten the delicate balance protecting this critical water supply. Environmental groups continue monitoring the swamp closely to prevent contamination or overuse. Florida's everyday water supply depends entirely on a swamp most people never think about. 47. Reaching out to touch a friendly-looking manatee could technically land someone in serious federal trouble. Federal law makes it illegal to touch manatees in Florida waters, even by accident. Manatees are protected under strict conservation laws due to their vulnerable population status. Tourists swimming near manatees are warned repeatedly not to reach out and touch them. Violators can face real fines despite claiming their intentions were completely harmless. Wildlife officials patrol popular manatee viewing areas, enforcing these protective rules strictly. Swimmers are instead taught to observe quietly without ever making physical contact. Florida's gentle sea cows apparently come with their own serious legal boundaries attached. 48. Quirky roadside attractions once pulled in more curious tourists than any major interstate highway ever could. Florida's small-town attractions thrived long before modern interstates bypassed most rural areas entirely. Giant alligator statues, shell shops, and strange museums once lined countless old highways statewide. Families driving cross-country frequently stopped specifically to see these odd roadside curiosities. New interstates eventually redirected traffic away from these once bustling small-town stops. Many attractions slowly closed as tourist dollars shifted toward faster modern routes instead. A few stubborn roadside spots still survive purely through nostalgia and loyal visitors. Florida's weirdest tourist stops quietly faded once highways stopped forcing anyone to notice them. 49. An enormous underground water system quietly ranks among the largest and most productive on the entire planet. Florida's aquifer system supplies drinking water to millions of residents statewide. Limestone layers beneath the state naturally filter and store massive amounts of fresh water. Sinkholes sometimes form when this underground rock structure unexpectedly collapses without warning. Development and heavy water usage put constant strain on this delicate underground resource. Scientists closely monitor aquifer levels to prevent serious long-term water shortages. Most residents never realize how much valuable water sits directly beneath their homes. Florida's greatest natural resource remains completely invisible to nearly everyone living above it. 50. Sunken ships scattered along Florida's coastline once supported an entire legal treasure hunting industry for decades. Storms and treacherous reefs sent countless Spanish and colonial-era ships to the ocean floor. Treasure hunters legally searched these wrecks for gold, silver, and valuable historic artifacts. Some divers became wealthy overnight after discovering massive sunken treasure hauls unexpectedly. Legal battles eventually arose over who truly owned recovered historical shipwreck treasures. States and federal agencies began asserting stronger claims over significant underwater discoveries. Modern regulations now tightly control how shipwreck salvage operations can legally proceed. Florida's ocean floor apparently doubled as one of history's largest unclaimed treasure chests. 51. One small island off Florida's coast has flown 8 completely different national flags throughout its long history. Amelia Island passed between French, Spanish, British, and American control over several centuries. Pirates, smugglers, and rebels also used the island as a lawless base at times. Each new ruling power left behind its own influence on the island's culture. Historians consider it one of the most fought-over pieces of land in the country. Locals proudly reference this unusual flag history as a point of regional pride. Museums on the island still display artifacts representing each different ruling era. Florida's tiny island somehow packed more national drama than most entire countries experience. 52. The oldest masonry fort still standing anywhere in the continental United States sits quietly along Florida's coast. Castillo de San Marcos was built by Spanish forces to defend St. Augustine. Construction began in the late 1600s using durable coquina stone material. That unusual stone actually absorbed cannonball impacts instead of shattering under pressure. The fort successfully withstood multiple attacks from rival colonial powers over the years. Ownership changed hands between Spain, Britain, and eventually the United States entirely. Visitors today can still walk through the same defensive walls built centuries ago. Florida's ancient fort quietly outlasted empires that once fought desperately to control it. 53. A simple glass of orange juice once became a surprising symbol during America's tense Cold War era. Federal nutrition campaigns promoted Florida orange juice as a healthy, patriotic breakfast choice. Marketing efforts linked drinking juice with strength, vitality, and national well-being during that period. Advertisements appeared constantly on television, radio, and in popular magazines nationwide. Florida's citrus industry benefited enormously from this unexpected wave of government-backed promotion. Sales skyrocketed as families adopted orange juice as a daily breakfast staple. Few people realized their morning drink carried political weight during tense global tensions. Florida's oranges accidentally became foot soldiers in America's Cold War image battle. 54. A Native American tribe operates its own sovereign nation quietly tucked within Florida's sprawling Everglades wetlands. The Miccosukee tribe maintains full sovereignty over its own tribal lands today. Their reservation exists legally separate from surrounding Florida state and county governance entirely. Tribal leaders manage their own laws, businesses, and cultural preservation programs independently. Airboat tours and cultural villages allow visitors to learn about Miccosukee traditions firsthand. The tribe has fought hard over decades to protect their ancestral Everglades homeland. Modern development pressures constantly threaten the delicate wetland ecosystem surrounding their territory. Florida's swamps quietly host an entire sovereign nation most tourists never even notice. 55. Entire fleets of gold-laden ships once sank along Florida's treacherous coastline while sailing back toward Europe. Spanish treasure fleets regularly wrecked against Florida's hidden reefs and violent storms. Ships carried gold, silver, and precious artifacts collected from colonies throughout the Americas. Sudden hurricanes frequently caught entire fleets completely off guard during their long voyages home. Some wrecks scattered valuable cargo across miles of ocean floor near the coastline. Treasure hunters, centuries later, discovered incredible hauls from these long-lost sunken fleets. Historians still study these wrecks to understand colonial trade and maritime disasters. Florida's coastline quietly became a graveyard for some of history's richest sunken treasure. 56. Bahamian laborers once played a massive role keeping Florida's booming citrus industry running smoothly for decades. Migrant workers traveled from the Bahamas specifically to work in Florida's citrus groves. Many settled permanently, establishing communities that blended Bahamian and Florida cultural traditions together. Harvest seasons required enormous amounts of manual labor picking fruit across massive groves. These workers endured difficult conditions while helping sustain one of Florida's largest industries. Their cultural influence remains visible today in certain historic Florida communities and traditions. Historians increasingly recognize their overlooked contributions to the state's economic development. Florida's citrus success quietly depended on laborers history nearly forgot to properly credit. 57. Florida's own rulebook has been completely rewritten multiple times since the state first joined the Union. The state constitution underwent major revisions reflecting changing political and social priorities. Each rewrite addressed issues like civil rights, government structure, and voting regulations differently. Lawmakers debated fiercely over what values each new version should truly represent. Some revisions came directly after major historical events forced serious legal reconsideration statewide. Legal scholars still study these various versions to understand Florida's shifting political history. Residents today live under a document quite different from the state's original founding version. Florida apparently believes some rules deserve regular reconsideration rather than permanent commitment. 58. A careful political balancing act allowed Florida to officially join the Union back in 1845. Lawmakers admitted Florida, specifically alongside Iowa, to maintain slave state versus free state balance. This deliberate pairing kept congressional power evenly split between opposing regional interests nationwide. Florida entered as the 27th state under this calculated political arrangement. National tensions over slavery were already simmering heavily during this exact period. Politicians viewed statehood admissions as delicate moves within a larger, dangerous balancing game. Florida's entry into the Union came wrapped in serious national political calculation. Florida basically joined America as part of a carefully negotiated political chess move. 59. Florida left the United States entirely, yet somehow became one of the first states welcomed back afterward. The state seceded from the Union in 1861 alongside other southern states. It joined the Confederacy and endured significant hardship throughout the Civil War period. Following the war, Florida became the third state formally readmitted into the Union. Reconstruction efforts attempted to rebuild the state's government and damaged infrastructure quickly. Political tensions remained high as former Confederates and freed citizens navigated an uncertain future. Historians note Florida's relatively fast readmission compared to other former Confederate states. Florida somehow managed to leave and return faster than many of its southern neighbors. 60. Florida's post-Civil War government barely lasted before political forces dramatically shut it down entirely. The state's Reconstruction-era government proved to be one of the shortest-lived nationwide. Political infighting, corruption accusations, and shifting national policies quickly destabilized the fragile administration. Newly freed citizens gained brief political representation before facing serious organized political backlash. Conservative political groups worked aggressively to regain control over state government structures. Reconstruction efforts collapsed faster in Florida compared to several other former Confederate states. Historians point to this brief period as a missed opportunity for lasting change. Florida's Reconstruction government flickered briefly before old power structures reclaimed firm control again. 61. An entire thriving black township disappeared from Florida within just a few terrifying days in 1923. The Rosewood Massacre destroyed a prosperous, self-sufficient black community almost completely. A false accusation against a black man sparked violent mob attacks across the town. Armed white mobs burned homes, churches, and businesses to the ground rapidly. Survivors fled into nearby swamps, seeking shelter from the escalating racial violence. Many residents never returned, choosing instead to rebuild their lives elsewhere entirely. Decades passed before the state formally acknowledged responsibility for what had happened. Florida's map quietly lost an entire town within less than a single week. 62. One of the deadliest Election Day incidents in American history unfolded quietly within a small Florida town. The Ocoee Massacre occurred in 1920 after black residents attempted to vote. White mobs violently attacked black neighborhoods, specifically to suppress political participation that day. Homes and businesses were burned, while residents faced brutal targeted violence throughout the town. Many black families were forced to permanently flee the area afterward. Ocoee remained a virtually all-white town for decades following the horrific violence. Historians only recently began properly documenting the true scale of what happened. Florida's Election Day violence quietly erased an entire community's political future overnight. 63. Cattle ranching in America actually has deep roots planted firmly within Florida, rather than out west. Spanish settlers introduced cattle to Florida centuries before famous Western ranching traditions ever developed. Ranchers herded cattle across Florida's open range using unique regional methods and tools. This made Florida one of the earliest cattle ranching regions anywhere in North America. Vast grasslands and mild winters provided ideal conditions for raising cattle successfully year-round. Ranching traditions developed independently from the more famous cowboy culture out west. Modern Florida still maintains a surprisingly large and active cattle ranching industry today. Florida quietly beat the Wild West to the cattle ranching game by centuries. 64. Cracking whips rather than cracking open food actually gave Florida's cowboys their surprisingly misunderstood nickname. Cracker cowboys earned their name from the loud sound their cattle whips produced. These whips helped herders drive cattle across Florida's thick brush and open grasslands effectively. Many people mistakenly assume the nickname relates to crackers, as in food, instead. Ranchers used this technique long before famous Western cowboys developed similar herding methods. The nickname eventually became associated more broadly with certain rural Florida communities overall. Some residents still proudly embrace the cracker label as a badge of regional pride. Florida's cowboys apparently got a food-related reputation from something completely unrelated to eating. 65. A doctor convicted in one of history's most famous assassination plots ended up imprisoned along Florida's remote coast. Samuel Mudd was sent to Fort Jefferson after treating John Wilkes Booth's injury. Authorities believed Mudd had knowingly helped Booth following Lincoln's assassination in 1865. He spent years imprisoned within the isolated fort surrounded entirely by ocean water. Mudd later helped treat prisoners during a serious yellow fever outbreak at the fort. His efforts eventually earned him a presidential pardon, reducing his lengthy sentence. Historians still debate how much Mudd truly knew about Booth's violent plans beforehand. Florida's most isolated fort briefly held a man tied to a president's murder. 66. Walking along miles of open beach became one man's entire job description for delivering everyday mail. The barefoot mailman route required carriers to walk between Palm Beach and Miami directly. No roads existed yet connecting these isolated coastal communities during that particular era. Carriers walked barefoot along the sand, since shoes quickly wore out from the terrain. The route took several days round trip through heat insects and occasional dangerous wildlife. Some carriers reportedly disappeared entirely while attempting this grueling, isolated mail route. Modern mail carriers today would struggle imagining this brutal, historic delivery method. Florida's mail once required something closer to survival skills than simple delivery work. 67. Thousands died during one hurricane, yet many victims went uncounted in official records for decades afterward. The 1928 Okeechobee hurricane killed an estimated thousands of people, primarily black migrant farm workers. Storm surge from Lake Okeechobee overwhelmed poorly protected farming communities almost without warning. Many victims were buried in unmarked mass graves without proper identification or records. Historical accounts largely ignored these workers compared to other hurricane victims at the time. Researchers and historians only recently began properly documenting the true scale of loss. Memorials eventually emerged decades later, acknowledging these long, overlooked, forgotten victims properly. Florida's deadliest hurricane quietly erased entire communities that history nearly forgot completely. 68. One writer captured an entire town's spirit that represented something remarkable in early Black American history. Zora Neale Hurston documented life in Eatonville, one of America's first incorporated all-black towns. She grew up within this proudly self-governed community located just outside Orlando. Her writings preserved local folklore traditions and everyday life within the town beautifully. Eatonville represented genuine black self-governance decades before the civil rights movement gained momentum. Hurston's work eventually became celebrated as an important piece of American literary history. The town still celebrates her legacy through annual festivals, honoring her contributions today. Florida quietly gave America both a groundbreaking town and the writer who documented it. 69. An ambitious canal project meant to slice across Florida ended up abandoned halfway through construction entirely. The Cross Florida Barge Canal aimed to connect the Atlantic Ocean directly to the Gulf. Construction dragged on for decades, facing funding problems and shifting political priorities. Environmental groups eventually raised serious concerns about damage to Florida's fragile ecosystem. Growing opposition argued the canal threatened wildlife wetlands and important natural water sources. Federal officials eventually halted construction permanently, despite significant money already spent. Portions of the unfinished canal still remain visible scattered across the state today. Florida's ambitious shortcut across the state ended up becoming an expensive, unfinished scar. 70. A massive sinkhole eventually became so unique that officials decided to protect it as parkland. Devil's Mill Hopper formed thousands of years ago through gradual limestone erosion underground. The sinkhole stretches over 100 feet deep, featuring its own small ecosystem inside. Rare plants and wildlife thrive within the cool, shaded environment found at its bottom. Legends among early settlers connected the site to spooky supernatural folklore and stories. Wooden stairs now allow visitors to safely descend into the massive natural feature. Scientists study the site to understand Florida's unique underground geological history. Florida turned a giant hole in the ground into a genuinely fascinating state park. 71. A river gained worldwide fame through song, despite the songwriter never actually visiting Florida in person. Stephen Foster's famous composition made the Suwannee River known across the entire country. He reportedly picked the river's name simply because it fit his song's rhythm nicely. Foster had never traveled to Florida or seen the actual river firsthand. Despite this, the song became deeply associated with Florida's cultural identity nationwide. Tourists and historians still visit the river specifically because of Foster's famous song. Florida embraced the tune anyway, naming it the state's official song eventually. Florida's most famous river owes its fame to a songwriter who never showed up. So there you have it, 71 wild reasons Florida truly earns its reputation as the strangest state in the entire country. But which one caught you off guard the most? Drop it in the comments below. And if you love dumb history done right, hit subscribe right now, because Dumbest Things has way more where this came from.